So many people have I think, just labeled you as a media guy. It's still hard for me to get used to.
Well, I'm on the media. I'm still a coach at heart. And I do look at things from coach's perspective, which I think is a little different maybe because people don't have that internal insight. So, and I think that's one of the things that hopefully I can offer to fans and create a little more interest. So I've enjoyed it so far.
Knowing you, you didn't roll in here, grab a couple of index cards. I'm particularly curious about just your preparation, getting ready for the season. We know you've talked to coaches because they've shared that with us, but take us through some of your own prep because I know you've dug deep and will continue to.
Yeah, well, like for the draft, I approached the draft exactly like I did when I was a coach in the NFL, and I evaluated the players on my own. And to come to this, it was a little more difficult because everybody's roster has changed pretty dramatically in terms of the additions that they've made, whether it's recruiting or transfer portal. But I watched everybody's spring game. I talked to I talked to all the head coaches and tried to marry up what their thoughts were about their team and then what I actually saw in a pretty general sense in watching the spring game. So I try to prepare for it just like I do if I was playing a game. So if we were playing somebody in the opener, I would actually watch the spring game to try to get some idea of what kind of team they may have.
I was with you on a plane once in the off season, and you were watching the Auburn spring game, and it's always stayed with me because nowadays, as you know, not much happens in a spring game. What are you looking for when you're watching a spring game?
Well, two things. Trying to evaluate personnel. It's easier to do at skill positions in a spring game than it is in the offensive line or defensive line, but you can see in general. And also, is the scheme relatively the same as it's been in the past? Is there something different that we need to prepare for? What I always did in the offseason was I was looking for things that were different so that we could practice against those things and prepare for them even in fall camp so that when we played that game, no matter when it was during the season, it wasn't the first time the players were exposed to it. So, and it's, coaches are like consistently coming up with new things. RPOs were something that started about, 10, 12 years ago. It's a totally new concept that created a different way to coach, but that's constantly happening in everything these coaches do.
All these coaches, when they're sharing things with you, what are you digging the deepest on?
Mostly their feeling about their team. Okay. Where is their team from a chemistry standpoint? What kind of discipline they have on the team? What kind of leadership do they have? What kind of buy-in do they have from the players on their team? Those are the types of things that I think go a long way in having a team that has the kind of accountability that you need to be able to be consistent in your execution to be successful. And those are more the things that I look for. I mean, I know all the plays, I know the defenses and all that, but it's what you're feeling about your team's intangibles relative to their approach to the season.
You would walk in here every year, and we would sit up here and just breathlessly wait for something to drop. Going back over the 17 years at Alabama and even before that at LSU, did you have a plan when you got here? Because I've never known you not to have an idea about the messaging. And it usually wasn't so much to the media, it was to your own team.
Yeah, I use the media a lot to message my team.
Right.
I'm figuring that you all are putting out a lot of rat poison. So I was going to put out my own sort of remedy to squelch the rat poison, as well as try to send a message to the team in terms of the way I wanted them to be thinking about the season.
And I mean, I don't play chess, but it feels like a chess game. When you had a team that you felt the best about, did you try to send a different type of message?
Yeah, I think the psychological disposition is hard to get perfect.
Okay.
But that's what you're trying to do.
Right.
You know, sometimes you have a young team, maybe they have a lot of anxiety, maybe they're not very confident, so you need to approach them one way. All right, then another year you have a very mature team, lots of experience, lots of guys coming back, good leadership, a lot of maturity on your team, so you're going to approach them a little differently. So it just depends on what you're dealing with, and every team's different. Every team is different. I mean, the one thing about college athletics that changes is you probably lose 25 to 30% of your team every year through graduation, guys going out for the draft or whatever. So new people have to have new roles on your team, and you need to create some of those things so that your team can still have the same culture that you need to be successful.
You mentioned the rat poison, and that's become one of the trademark lines of your career.
And you were actually one of those that sort of contributed to that, the manufacturing of that, as well as anybody in your profession.
Well, listen. I want to take credit for anything I can, and one day I not at an event like this, I'd like to learn more about that part. But I always felt whenever I saw you, and when I moved, I didn't see you quite as much, but that when you would see me or anyone, I don't know what else you were. You were always sending a message somehow. I mean, I mean, you were a great person to talk to, but when you were talking to a reporter or a commentator, what were you thinking about? Because you just weren't asking me about the weather or my golf game.
No, I was actually always trying to prepare myself for what message do I want to send to our fans, to our players, and in general to reinforce the culture of the program, which was, what's the best way for me to get every player on our team to be as successful as they could be in terms of their decision making, their judgments, how they're going to execute, their lifestyle, the decisions that they make relative to off the field as well as on the field. You know, these things don't happen on the field. Like, you don't develop all the strength that you have on the field. You develop it in the weight room and take it to the field. You don't develop discipline on the field. You develop discipline in your life and the choices and decisions that you make, and you take it to the field. So I was always trying to say, okay, how do I message whatever those messages are to get people to be focused on trying to do things the right way to enhance their chances of being successful?
Did you? I mean, you can't turn away from success, but because of your success, which we all have documented, did it make it more challenging though? Because you had a fan base that, let's be honest, you spoiled them to death.
Well, let me put it to you this way. You know, in the beginning, I'm putting a mountain up on the board and saying, okay, how do we climb this mountain successfully? And it gets more treacherous at the top the closer you get to the top.
Right.
So you got to overcome more. You got to have the right sense of what you have to do to continue to be successful. But once you do that successfully several times, you sort of become the mountain.
Right.
All right, so everybody's shooting at you. Everybody wants to beat you. Everybody's got that game circled. So you have to have a different disposition on your team. All right, we started out trying to prove that we could climb the mountain. Now that we have to prove that if we are the mountain, what's our motivation to be as good as we could be without any external factor contributing to that? We have nothing to prove. So you have to have a different type of person. You have to have a different disposition. You have to have guys that are internally motivated to be the best that they can be. They're not motivated because of what somebody else said about them or something that they have to prove or some revenge that they're trying to get for a game that they lost a year ago, because those things don't last like the internal motivation of wanting to be the best player you can be and taking every challenge and always looking to be better than you are. And, you know, we had occasions where I always did the good, bad, and ugly after a game. You know, Monday meeting, All right, I'm going to have 20 plays on this reel. 5 or 6 of them are going to be really good plays, and this is why they were really good plays. Here's some really bad plays, and this is why they were really bad. And here's some really ugly plays that'll get us beat if we don't get these things fixed. And, sometimes players would look at you like, hey, coach, we won the game. Why are we doing this? But the outcome is not just winning and losing. The winning and losing is the outcome. How do you stay focused on the things that you need to do to get the outcome? Because there's another outcome you got to get next week. And to have players that can learn how to think that way, I think is what is really important to continuing to be successful. It's more difficult to deal with success than it is to deal with failure. When you fail, when you get beat, players are all ready to buy in on Monday morning. What do we have to do to get better? But when you win, they're all relieved that we won. All right, so now we should get a day off. We should have less practice today. We're still going to run sprints on Monday. I mean, what reward do we get for having won the game? And I'm worried about the next game.
Right.
This is what we have to do. We have to run sprints today because we got to get ready for the next game. So we had a 24-hour rule. That game's over, whether we won or whether we lost. What can we learn from it? Never waste a failing. So let's learn from it and grow from it and see how much better we can get the next week.
I love to continue this forever. It is so interesting. Hopefully we can revisit it. But Coach, thank you so very much for coming back.
Well, do you remember me trying to teach you how to play bump and run?
I do, and
I just want you to know that was my most difficult coaching moment in my career. Was trying to develop you as a corner.
If I could be truthful here, you failed. Because I would have intercepted the pass. We were in somebody's front yard, by the way. But you never, and since I'm not familiar with the position, you never told me which hand to use. I used the wrong hand.
Well, I want you to know that when I didn't have success as a coach, I never blamed the player. So I never blamed you. I actually put the responsibility for me failing to get you to play corner on me, not you, just so you know.
Well, it remains a very big disappointment that I didn't intercept. And by the way, and you were the quarterback too, so I would have intercepted your pass.
But I was a quarterback in high school.
I think I tried to go that way, and I should have gone.
And I eventually became the best interception thrower in the National Football League, being a secondary coach.
Well, Coach, I don't know where either one of us goes from this moment on, but I will forever remember that failure of yours, and I vow the next time we're in somebody's front yard, I will intercept you.
All right, good deal. Appreciate
Coach,
it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nick Saban joining us here.